If not, questions on adoption of the amendment offered by Mr. Wilson. So many as are in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Are there other amendments? Mr. Barber, you have an amendment at the desk?
Mr. Chairman, I have a
Clerk will please pass out the amendment. Without objection, reading of the amendment will be dispensed with. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Arizona for purposes of offering and explaining his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for hearing us on this issue today. As you all know, the underlying bill would allow the Air Force to retire the A-10. While the bill claims that the fighters could be put back into service if the military needs them, it's not that simple. We won't be shrink-wrapping the pilots, nor will we shrink-wrap the maintenance crews, so we can't really get this plane in the air as quickly as is suggested by the underlying bill. Their years of service and experience and institutional knowledge will be gone. This is not a compromise to keep the aircraft viable. This is divestment, I believe, by another name. This is a proven platform to protect our troops in battle. In Afghanistan, the troops told me, keep the A-10 flying. At Fort Huachuca, those who came back from Afghanistan said, keep the A-10 flying. There is no other fixed-wing aircraft that does the job that the A-10 can do. So we really, Mr. Chairman, must take a look at this. Mr. General Odierno, just 2 days ago, in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee, spoke highly of the A-10. He said, I quote, they can see it. Soldiers like the A-10. They can hear it. They have confidence in it. Obviously, we prefer the A-10. While I support the efforts to modernize the Air Force, it cannot be at the expense of the only proven close air support we have. We cannot create a gap in this capability because it will put our ground troops at risk. This bipartisan amendment that I am offering with Ms. Hartzler and Mr. Scott would prohibit the divestment of the A-10 and fully fund the operation out of the OCO budget. It would not create an imbalance in the top line. The amendment would further require the GAO to conduct a study evaluating the platforms the Air Force used to conduct close air support missions, their capabilities, cost assessments, and whether the airframes in the Air Force are able to provide the close air support. My colleagues and I have found a way to keep this aircraft flying. I hope you will join with us in supporting the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your help with this, and I appreciate General Welsh as well. I know there are a lot of tough decisions that are having to be made today. The thing that's different about the A-10 is this weapon system is flying in combat today, right now overseas, and we're talking about an immediate drawdown of 400 wings that are providing close cover for our men and women that are on the ground. It is an extremely efficient plane. It costs us about a fourth per hour of what it costs to fly the B-1 bomber. Plus, it is on station where the B-1 bomber is in many cases hours away. I agree with my colleague, Mr. Barber, about the concept of while we can shrink wrap the airplane, the bottom line is the training of the pilots is one of the most important things, and we cannot send pilots into combat that aren't trained on the aircraft that they're going in on. I would ask you to give us this amendment, not for those of us who are sponsoring it, but for the men and women that are down there on the ground fighting the fight. This plane is flying right now overseas protecting our men and women, and we're talking about drawing down 400 wings almost immediately, and we have no system to replace it with. The idea that the F-35, when it comes off the assembly line and it starts being based, everything will be okay, that's great. But that's 7 to 8 years from now. And let's just be honest about this. The idea that the U.S. is not going to be in combat for the next 7 to 8 years, it's a dream. And we all hope for peace, and we want peace, but we have an obligation to protect the men and women that are on the ground carrying out the mission, and the infantry and the other men and women need this. I would ask for your support for this. This is a small price to pay to protect the men and women that are out there serving our country.
Gentleman, time. Ms. Hartzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a major proposal from the Air Force to divest an entire fleet. And what we are asking today is that we stop that for at least 1 year until there's a study done that shows that our men and women on the ground will be able to have that close air support they need. As my colleagues, Mr. Scott, Mr. Barber, have said, there are these platforms are over in Afghanistan right now, and I'm proud of the 442nd Unit out of Whiteman Air Force Base, which I represent, which was just deployed a month ago, to be there and provide that close air support. And why would we want to divest this fleet when they are saving lives as we speak tonight? This platform has saved thousands of lives. In Desert Storm, they were responsible for the destruction of 4,000 military vehicles and artillery pieces. In Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom, the A-10 has performed nearly 1/3 of the combat activities. It is a unique platform that can fly low and slow. And as General Odinero said, the A-10 is the best close air support platform we have today. You talk to any person on the ground, any Army or any Marine soldier, and they will tell you that the platform, the airplane they want to see coming over that hill is the A-10. It has capabilities that no other plane can do. It is saving lives. This will save it for at least another year so that we can continue the fight and, most importantly, continue to save lives. So I ask my colleagues to please support this for the good of our troops. I yield back.
Mr. Enyart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, strongly support the Barber amendment, Mr. Barber's amendment. A couple of weeks ago, as this debate was unfolding, I received a message on my Facebook account. That message was from Command Sergeant Major Mark Bowman. And the Command Sergeant Major was the Command Sergeant Major for the Illinois Army National Guard's 33rd Infantry Brigade Combat Team when they served in Afghanistan. Command Sergeant Major Bowman asked me, he said, "General, save this airplane. Don't let the big guys take this plane down." Excuse me. And the reason that he wanted that plane still up in the air is because he witnessed it save soldiers' lives in Afghanistan. I understand we don't have all the money in the world, and I understand we can't have every platform. The F-35, I'm sure, is going to be a wonderful airplane, but it's far from being operationally ready today. It's years away, as Mr. Scott pointed out. As he points out, we can't afford to have that gap in capabilities for the next 7 years while our infantrymen and our Marines are out there.
Would the gentleman yield?
So, no,
question?
I will finish, and my remarks will be done very shortly here. I've got 30 seconds left. So, in support of Command Sergeant Major Bowman and all of those soldiers out there, I urge that you vote yes on Mr. Barber's amendment. Thank you. Yield back.
Mr. Whitman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, folks, there's no doubt the A-10 aircraft, fantastic aircraft, does a splendid job in that close air support role. The question is not about the aircraft. The question really is about where we go to get the dollars to make this happen. This comes from the Overseas Contingency Operation Funds. My big concern is these funds go to fund our retrograde, getting our equipment out of Afghanistan, but also the reset, bringing that equipment back, making sure that it's ready for those men and women that are ready to serve on that next mission. It also goes to enduring missions within the military. So it not only covers the operational functions there in Afghanistan, it also covers enduring missions that are going to be continued after Afghanistan. So the difficulty is if we take money away from those elements, we are affecting critical areas within other areas of the Department of Defense. No doubt the A-10 is a great aircraft. Remember, too, we're going to be decreasing the OCO budget, the base budget, without really knowing what that request is. So we're kind of flying blind here. We're asking to take money out from a figure that we really don't know what that figure might be, so we can't even estimate what the impact might be on how enduring missions might be affected, or even the operational aspects of what continues in Afghanistan. Even if we don't have a bilateral security agreement, we still are going to need those funds at least up until the end of this year and possibly after with the bilateral security agreement. I have concerns about us doing that from these operational funds, these funds that go to fund enduring missions, that go directly to the warfighter, go directly to reset and retrograde. And we know historically making sure that we get that right, taking those funds away is problematic. And it also sets up a dangerous precedent by taking money out of those funds that we know exactly what they go to. And a hearing we had recently before the Readiness Subcommittee, the vice chiefs were very, very focused on saying, be concerned about taking OCO dollars away because these are enduring mission dollars and things that will continue well past the end of our operations in Afghanistan. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I with reservations, am in opposition to this amendment.
Gentleman from New York, Mr. Mappy.
Yeah,
recognize
Mr. Chairman, I'll be very brief. Listening to those arguments, I think that makes sense. But until another aircraft can be proven to do the mission, this close air support where they're doing rugged environments, flying in rugged environments, potentially very close, where the enemy is very close to our troops, I just don't see how we can retire the A-10. I, too, have talked to a lot of pilots. They're extraordinarily concerned about retirement of the A-10 before we find something else that can replace its unique capability. So maybe we need to find some other different place to pay for it. But I don't want to lose the forest through the trees here, and I think we've got to, I mean, obviously we have to worry about the future, but we've got to worry about the present as well.
Will the gentleman yield?
Will the gentleman yield?
Yeah, I will actually yield the rest of my time to my friend, Mr. Barber, and thank him for his leadership.
I thank the gentleman. I just want to, with all respect to my chairman of our Readiness Committee, say we have two missions overseas today, one in Korea and the other in Afghanistan. They are enduring missions. If we draw down the A-10 from those two places, we put our troops at risk. Crazy man in North Korea. We never know what he's going to do tomorrow or the next day. We have to make sure our pilots are in place and our troops are protected. If we have a residual force, which I hope we do, and the bilateral security agreement in Afghanistan, we're going to need close air support. I think I remember General Dempsey came to our meeting here, our hearing rather, and he said he has to have close air support in Afghanistan post the drawdown of most of our troops. So I really respect the concerns about the OCO budget. I guess we'll soon find out what it is, but I think we're asking to spend perhaps 0.008 of that budget, as best we understand it, to protect our troops.
Would the gentleman yield for just a second?
I will, of course.
10 seconds. We make a lot of decisions in this room that are hundreds of millions, billions, and over the course of a decade, trillions of dollars. We're talking about $1.5 million per plane.
This time has expired.
Per plane.
Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to echo what Chairman Whitman was saying with respect to the offset. And I certainly want to commend the gentleman for bringing up the issue for the A-10s. My subcommittee, Air and Land, has overlapping jurisdiction with respect to the A-10s, and Rob Bishop, Mr. Barber, did what I thought was a very informative briefing with the subcommittee on A-10s, and I have very grave concerns about what is happening. But my grave concerns go to the top line number that we're giving the Department of Defense and what's then having to happen within the Department of Defense as a result of that top line number. Within the constraints that we have, I thank the chairman for what he's doing with respect to the A-10s, and I certainly hope that there we can get a different outcome as this bill progresses, as the appropriations process progresses. I know the Senate side is going to be looking at this, but we really don't have the options and the flexibility to undertake what really would be a massive shifting to avoid this outcome with the A-10. So even though I would agree that the aspects is that this plane is absolutely incredibly capable and provides a unique capability that certainly is highly praised and needed. Our problem is that we're not spending enough on the Department of Defense, not that we need to rob what we are spending within this bill for this. And again, I hope certainly that our message is clear, that both the administration, Department of Defense, and as this moves through other committees, and that the rest of Congress hears that these are real, bad decisions that we're having to make as a result of a bad top-line number. And although I greatly support what the gentleman is bringing forth here, I can't support this amendment for the reasons Mr. Whitman has said.
Gentleman, time expired. Ms. Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight I've spoken out about my concerns with spending on military equipment that is over budget, underperforming, and long overdue, such as the LCS, or last year I spoke about the F-35. That's not the case with the A-10. This aircraft falls into the same category as iconic military equipment that has more than paid back taxpayers for the cost of its development, not just in dollars, but in lives saved. This aircraft falls in the same category as the Deuce and a Half, the Huey, or the Ma Deuce, and the C-130. There is no doubt that the A-10 is a great aircraft for the Air Force, but most importantly, this aircraft is good for ground troops. As a former pilot, I know how important close air support is to the commander on the ground, to her troops when they are combating an enemy in an ever-changing battlefield. Pilots must be able to have great situational awareness of the actions on the ground and the most accurate firepower. Troops need to know that the close air support they call in is capable of delivering the kind of deadly firepower and with precision of the A-10, especially in danger close situations. I, too, am concerned with the funding mechanism for this amendment, but let me tell you, I would rather make sure that we bring our troops home before I worry about bringing the equipment home. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and let's keep the aircraft flying so that we can save our troops' lives. Thank you.
Mr. Klein. Ms. Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, some of this jurisdiction was under the Air Tactical Committee, subcommittee, where Mr. Turner and I represent the two sides. Mr. Barber has presented an important amendment that would preserve the best close air support platform in the Air Force inventory. He has never wavered in his support of the A-10, and he has intensely fought for its airmen and its mission. And I want to thank him personally for his leadership to save the Warthog. He, in fact, did a 101 special session, a briefing for the committee to talk about the critical capability of the A-10. I said earlier in the evening that I am married to a retired colonel from the Army, that he was a JAG. More importantly, he was an infantry. He jumped out of perfectly good airplanes all the time. And his one comment about the A-10 is that the Army infantry, the men on the ground of the A-10, he says one of the things they feared the most all the time were tanks. But he said that the A-10 chews up and spits out enemy tanks. And so it definitely is a chosen platform by the men who are in combat when we send them out. So I just want to reiterate the support that Mr. Barber has had in trying to save this A-10, and I yield back.
Lady yields back. Ms. Gabbard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm a proud soldier, military police officer, and very proudly support Mr. Barber's amendment that saves the best close air support platform that we have, which supports our ground troops as they conduct their mission. I think Mr. Barber's made a very strong case for the A-10, and I commend his work to save the Warthog. I've heard from numerous commanders on the ground, both Army and Air, about basically how practical, successful, and necessary the A-10 is because of its slow speeds and low flying altitudes. There's not another aircraft today that performs these missions. And the Warthog provides an enormous amount of firepower that our service members on the ground depend on and look to have their back on the battlefield. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Dr. Wenstrup.
I yield 2 minutes to Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wenstrup. We on this committee and as members of Congress, we authorize billions of dollars at the time on weapon systems that we hope will work 7, 8, 10, 20 years in the future that we hope we don't ever need to use. And quite honestly, sometimes I agree with it, sometimes I don't. But I do think that we've got to prepare for future. But we've also got a very clear and present danger right now. We're not talking about billions or trillions of dollars. We're talking about millions here. We're talking about millions. This system is missing the zeros from the cost of most of the systems that we have. The other thing that I'll tell you is we're using this system right now. We know it works. This isn't something that we hope will work in the future, that we hope we don't have to use. This is a system that works today. It's working right now. It's a system that we need. And I would just appreciate your support of the amendment. And, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your help with this. But if the pilots aren't trained in the plane can't provide the cover. With that, I yield the remainder of my time.
Okay. I've listened very carefully. This is Mr. Nugent, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I just got back from Fort Riley, Kansas this Tuesday. In speaking with one of the battalion commanders at Fort Riley about his experience with the Warthog, the A-10, in his combat time, and speaking with my son, who is a combat veteran of Afghanistan, they swear by that aircraft. That gave them the greatest sense of safety ever. It can loiter over a position for a long period of time, put accurate fire on the enemy, and to walk away from that platform, I think, is a dangerous precedent that we make. Now, I understand my other friends that are saying, hey, listen, concerned about the pay for. Well, I can tell you is this. As a dad of 3 soldiers, you can't put a value on a soldier or a Marine's life that are in combat, in the field, calling. And so when we think about all this, I think we need to put that in perspective and say, you know, maybe the Pentagon can come up with a way to pay for this without sacrificing readiness. I yield back. Thank you very much.
Let me just state a couple of things. All of our decisions here are not between good and bad. They're between good and good. And the problem is paying for them. We have very limited funds. And so what we did, the Air Force came in with a proposal. My feeling was don't talk to the Air Force, talk to the infantry, talk to the guys on the ground. But I just came back from Afghanistan, and I was told over there that our troops are no longer engaged in the fighting, and we are not providing close air ground support at this point. And the A-10 cannot go into a contested area. We have to have total control of the skies before the A-10 is able to be used for close ground support. Now, I cannot support the offset provided. We do not have the ability to take $500 million from operation and maintenance out of the OCO fund. It's not there. So what we did, instead of doing the Air Force's proposal to basically mothball these planes, we said, no, you have to hold them to where we can bring them back if something happens next year and we get the money and we're able to do it. And I'll tell you, we have 62 members on this committee. It's the largest committee in Congress. And if we would each go pick 2 or 3 or 4 members and do the same thing that Mr. Turner just talked about, we need to drive more money to the top line so that we're not having to choose between good and good. Because there is nothing bad to say about this plane. It's been vital to us. And the problem is we just don't have the money. And to come up with enough money to do what would need to be done, you're talking a lot more than this money taken out of here now. So the OCO funds, we've been short the last couple of years, so we've been putting the bills forward. We're going to need, we don't even know what the OCO is. We put a $79 billion in here, hoping that it will cover the needs. But as we pull out of Afghanistan, we're going to be spending more to come out than to maintain. Plus, we don't know what the ongoing mission is going to be, and that's what's going to be needed there. We also use OCO in the Gulf to try to keep an eye on Iran and see what they're doing. So I'm reluctantly going to have to oppose this very laudable amendment based on those grounds. Is there any further debate on this amendment? If not, the question is on the adoption of the amendment. The gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Barber. So many as are in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to.
Mr. Chairman, I call for a recorded vote.
Roll call vote has been requested, and we will call the roll call at the end of the chairman's mark. Are there other amendments?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Mr. Hunter has an amendment at the desk. Please, clerk, pass out the amendment. And without objection, the reading of the amendment will be dispensed with. The chair now recognizes the gentleman